For years, Welcome to Plathville painted a picture of a family that seemed almost too perfect. Golden sunsets, guitar songs, and carefully chosen smiles. But like most stories polished for television, what we saw wasn't the full truth. Beneath that calm southern charm, something deeper was always stirring, something no one wanted to talk about. And now that silence has finally cracked. Because when the camera stopped rolling and the spotlights faded, the truth about one of Plathville's most beloved faces began to surface. And it wasn't the story fans were expecting. Micah Plath, the golden boy of the family, the one who broke free from his parents' strict world, stepped out of Cairo, Georgia, and into California's world of freedom, fame, and modeling lights. For so long, he was seen as the success story, the boy who found his wings. But freedom isn't always what it seems. And for Micah, those wings came at a cost he never imagined. That's where Veronica entered his life. Soft-spoken, grounded, and real, she wasn't from the world of cameras or attention. To many fans, she felt like a breath of fresh air, someone who didn't care about fame, someone who truly saw Micah beyond his image. Their connection seemed authentic, natural. On social media, in rare glimpses on screen, they appeared calm, stable, and mature. The kind of couple that made people believe maybe, just maybe, someone from the Plath family had found peace. But appearances can be the most powerful masks, because even as fans praised Micah's new chapter, there were whispers, subtle changes, quiet posts, and deleted moments that hinted something wasn't right. Hi friends, I'm Sarah, and welcome back to Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily, where we dive deep into the stories reality TV doesn't want you to see. If you love uncovering the truth behind the picture perfect, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and comment below with your thoughts. Because today's story isn't just about love and loss, it's about the silence that exposes everything. Because behind those California smiles, something was breaking, and soon, the silence would speak louder than any episode. When Welcome to Plathville first showed glimpses of Micah's new life, fans noticed something different. Not just in his location or his confidence, but in his energy. Gone was the shy, quiet young man who used to look over his shoulder, unsure of whether his choices were right or wrong. California gave Micah something that Plathville never could. Space. Space to breathe, to grow, and to make choices for himself. And in that new chapter, one person quietly entered the frame. Veronica. She wasn't introduced with flashy scenes or staged confessionals. Instead, her presence unfolded gradually, in subtle interactions, off-camera mentions, and warm photos shared on social media. To those who paid attention, she wasn't just another face in Micah's busy modeling world. She was someone who grounded him. On screen, Veronica's energy was gentle, even understated. She wasn't performing for the camera or chasing attention, and that's exactly why fans noticed her. She represented something calm amid the chaos, the kind of woman who didn't need to post every detail to prove her connection. The chemistry between them wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, familiar, grown up. And for a while, it felt like Welcome to Plathville had found a rare love story untouched by the usual noise. Micah had left behind his family's controlled environment, the heavy rules, and the guilt of disappointing his parents. Veronica, in her own way, seemed like the reward for his courage, someone who accepted him for who he was becoming, not who he had been forced to be. Fans started rooting for them. Comments under photos were filled with hearts and hope. Micah finally looks happy. She seems real, not fake. This is the love he deserves. But sometimes, the calmest stories hide the deepest storms. Because as Micah's career began to soar, something else began to shift. Quietly, almost invisibly at first. He was everywhere. Modeling campaigns, gym partnerships, podcasts, travel shoots. The boy from a conservative farm had become a confident man in front of cameras that once made him nervous. His followers grew, his brand sharpened, and his schedule became relentless. And with each step he took into the spotlight, Veronica became a little more invisible. The same social media that once celebrated their connection began to reflect a subtle absence. Fewer photos together, fewer mentions, and eventually, silence. Fans noticed, of course. Reality TV audiences always do. But the show didn't highlight it. Welcome to Plathville focused on Micah's independence, his new lifestyle, his confidence. rarely touching the emotional sacrifices behind that transformation. For Veronica, that silence said everything. You could see it. In the few interviews she gave, in the tone of her responses to fan questions, she never seemed bitter, just heartbroken. In a quiet, contained way, and that quiet pain spoke volumes. Viewers connected with her, not because she was dramatic or loud, but because she was real. She represented every person who's ever given their heart to someone chasing a dream, hoping they'd remember who helped them get there. The world celebrated Micah's freedom, but what about Veronica's loss? There was a tenderness in how she still spoke of him, even when she didn't have to. A dignity in how she never tried to tear him down, even when fans were demanding answers. She never made herself the victim, even though she easily could have. And that's what made her story hit harder. Because while Micah's journey was about self-discovery, Veronica's was about emotional endurance. The kind that doesn't make headlines, but leaves a scar that doesn't fade. As Micah's public life expanded, the emotional distance between them grew. He was living the dream. Photo shoots, travel, new opportunities, and fans began to notice that Veronica wasn't by his side anymore. Her posts became more introspective, quieter, filled with messages about healing, faith, and moving on. At first, people assumed it was just the natural drift of two adults finding their separate paths. But then came the whispers, the comments, the DMs, the clues that made fans start to wonder if something deeper had happened. Because timelines didn't quite add up. Posts that once matched no longer aligned. Mentions were deleted, certain photos disappeared, and Veronica, the woman who had always stood in calm honesty, began to sound different. Her captions hinted at betrayal, about learning who truly stood by her, about rebuilding trust, and about letting go of people who wear masks. The internet doesn't miss details like that. Slowly, fans began piecing together the parts the show avoided. Allegations surfaced, quiet, unconfirmed, but powerful enough to make people rewatch old episodes with new eyes. The chemistry that once looked effortless now felt distant. The smiles seemed strained. The tension invisible to casual viewers suddenly looked painfully obvious. And while Micah stayed silent, Veronica's quiet transparency began to draw empathy. People saw her pain as genuine, not performative. They admired how she carried herself, how she didn't lash out, how she kept her voice steady even when she had every reason to scream. She had loved someone who was learning to love himself more than anyone else, and that realization can be shattering. In the world of Welcome to Plathville, where control, image, and morality often blur together, Veronica's heartbreak felt too human to ignore. She wasn't a celebrity or a storyline. She was a reminder that behind every perfect reality TV image, there's someone quietly breaking, quietly enduring, quietly finding strength again. And while the show may have brushed over her pain, the fans didn't. They saw the shift. They felt the silence. They read between the lines. Because sometimes, the most painful truth isn't spoken in a confession, it's hidden in the things people stop saying. And that's where the story truly began to unravel, with something Micah never said out loud, but the internet soon pieced together. When Veronica finally broke her silence, it wasn't through a dramatic video or a tell-all interview. It happened slowly, through carefully chosen words, heartfelt responses, and moments of raw honesty that slipped through her Q&A sessions online. She didn't name names. She didn't point fingers, but the truth didn't need names to hurt. In one of her most emotional posts, Veronica shared a simple sentence that echoed louder than any accusation. Sometimes the person you trusted the most teaches you what betrayal really means. And that was all it took. The internet connected the dots, quickly, ruthlessly. Fans who had followed Micah and Veronica's relationship since its beginning felt a chill. This wasn't a messy breakup. This was heartbreak wrapped in silence, layered with disappointment. Soon after, whispers turned into threads. Screenshots resurfaced. Old photos were compared with new ones. Subtle clues that once seemed meaningless, captions, dates, missing posts, now pointed toward one story. Micah hadn't been faithful. It wasn't tabloid noise this time. The timeline matched. The emotional tone matched. The subtle anger in Veronica's words wasn't gossip. It was grief. In another Q&A, when asked if she believed in second chances, Veronica replied softly, "Forgiveness doesn't mean going back. It means letting go, even when they never said sorry." That quiet strength, the way she handled betrayal without bitterness, became her signature. Fans flooded her comments with messages of love, support, and solidarity. Many saw themselves in her, the woman who gave everything, only to watch the truth unfold in real time. Meanwhile, Welcome to Plathville carried on as if nothing had happened. The show's tone remained carefully curated. Soft lighting, reflective music, and long pauses that danced around uncomfortable truths. Micah's storyline was framed around independence and personal growth. His modeling career flourished. His confidence seemed untouchable. But to those paying attention, something was missing: accountability. Because while the cameras followed his fitness shoots and family dinners, they never showed the aftermath of his personal choices. Viewers noticed that selective silence. It wasn't just about privacy, it was about protecting an image. And that's when the audience began asking the hard questions. Why was Veronica's pain invisible? Why did no one in the family acknowledge what had happened, not even with empathy? To longtime fans of Welcome to Plathville, this wasn't surprising. The Plath family had always walked a delicate line between moral image and emotional reality. From Kim and Barry's rigid control over their children's choices to their selective forgiveness when lines were crossed, accountability was never applied equally. Ethan and Olivia were condemned for independence. Mariah was labeled rebellious. Lydia was watched for her faith. But when it came to Micah, the golden son, the one who brought the family good press, silence. Not a word, not even a hint of concern. It was the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Because while Veronica was left to heal in public, the Plaths stood in the shadows, pretending nothing had changed. The same family that once preached faith, forgiveness, and truth seemed to have forgotten all three when the truth hit close to home. And for viewers, that contradiction hit hard. Micah's public posts continued. Upbeat, gym shots, laughter, life goes on captions. But to many, it felt hollow. It wasn't the confident independence fans once admired. It was avoidance. A polished version of freedom that came at someone else's expense. And through it all, Veronica never lashed out. She chose dignity over drama, strength over shouting. When followers asked if she regretted loving him, she said something that silenced everyone. "I don't regret love. I regret ignoring the signs that someone had already stopped loving me." That one sentence, so simple, so real, became the emotional heartbeat of this whole story. Because Welcome to Plathville had always been about image, the image of faith, the image of purity, the image of control. But what happens when that image cracks under the weight of human imperfection? What happens when the truth doesn't fit the script? Veronica's strength reminded viewers that reality TV only shows one side, the one they want us to see. The quiet pain, the unanswered questions, the betrayal that doesn't make good TV. That's where the real story lives. As weeks passed, fan reactions evolved from shock to sorrow to respect. Hashtags began to appear in her defense. Justice for Veronica. Truth behind the smile. We stand with her. She didn't need a PR team. She had truth. And while Micah remained silent, that silence became its own statement. One that said, yes, it happened, without ever saying a word. In one fan forum, a comment summed it up perfectly. Micah lost more than a relationship. He lost credibility. Veronica didn't expose him. His own silence did. Even those who had once defended him began to question the values the Plaths stood for. Kim and Barry, who once built their family's foundation on faith and discipline, were now being called out for hypocrisy. Their silence wasn't protective. It was complicit, because the family that preached truth suddenly had no truth to give. In the end, Veronica's greatest act wasn't the reveal. It was her resilience. She didn't need to destroy anyone to stand in her truth. She simply refused to carry someone else's lies anymore. And that's where her power came from. She didn't win by exposing him. She won by surviving him. For Veronica, truth became her only form of healing, even if no one from the family stood beside her. When it comes to the Plath family, one thing has always stood out. The rules were never the same for everyone. We've seen it season after season on Welcome to Plathville. There's a clear pattern in how grace, judgment, and forgiveness are handed out, not by fairness, but by favoritism. And in the aftermath of Micah and Veronica's heartbreak, that pattern became impossible to ignore. Think back to when Ethan called out his younger sister Lydia for her growing closeness with Zach. Remember those tense moments when he questioned her faith, her boundaries, her intentions? His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried disappointment, as if her choices somehow reflected the family's moral image. Lydia, who has always been the emotional heart of the Plath kids, took his words to heart. She cried. She defended herself. She prayed harder. But when the truth about Micah's betrayal came out, the same Ethan who had once held others accountable fell completely silent. No statements, no acknowledgement, nothing. And that's what left fans stunned. Because how can someone who once lectured about morality stay quiet when the truth hits closer to home? This isn't just about Ethan. It's about a culture within the Plath family that has always protected certain people while punishing others for the very same mistakes. We saw it with Mariah, too. Her music, her clothing, her independence, all treated as rebellion. She was labeled as the lost one, the emotional one, the one who strayed from the family's values. But when Micah moved to Los Angeles and began modeling, often shirtless, embracing a lifestyle completely opposite of his upbringing, the family called it growth. The same behavior, two completely different reactions. That's what fans called the Plath double standard. And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Ethan, who once wrestled with his parents' control, now carries a quiet judgment that mirrors the same system he fought to escape. Lydia is still trapped between loyalty and freedom. Mariah was shamed for chasing music, while Micah was celebrated for chasing fame. Even Kim and Barry, the architects of this world, operate in contradictions. They speak of faith, forgiveness, and integrity, but when it comes to accountability, they choose silence. Take Kim's response during earlier seasons when her children questioned her choices. How quickly she labeled their voices as disrespect. Yet when her son's actions hurt someone deeply, she found words like private matter and personal journey. That's not protection. That's selective morality. And it's that silence, that quiet picking and choosing, that corrodes the very faith they built their reputation on. Then there's Tegan. Her story, though smaller on screen, mirrors the same pain of being judged by a family that measures worth by appearance. Her relationship with Ethan brought up old wounds, how the Plaths handle love that doesn't fit their mold. Fans remember those subtle moments when she looked uncomfortable, the way Ethan seemed torn between pleasing his family and protecting his partner. It was another reminder that love in this family often has to fight for permission. And when you zoom out, you see the pattern. Mariah punished for emotion, Lydia pressured by faith, Ethan trapped in image, and Micah protected by silence. The rules bend for some and break others. That's the heart of the problem. Not one mistake, but the absence of fairness. What makes this story powerful isn't just the drama. It's what it reveals about how conditional forgiveness can destroy trust. When families claim to live by faith, by truth, by accountability, and then stay silent when one of their own causes harm, that silence becomes hypocrisy. It sends a message to the people who were hurt. You don't matter as much as our image does. For many viewers who grew up in similar homes where appearances were everything, this storyline hit home. They saw themselves in Veronica's quiet pain. They saw their pasts in Mariah's rebellion, in Lydia's confusion, in Ethan's silence. Because selective forgiveness doesn't just damage relationships, it damages faith. It teaches that confession is only required for some, that consequences are optional for those who look the part, and that truth can be ignored if it's inconvenient. And that's why so many fans felt frustrated watching the Plaids close ranks around Micah, while leaving Veronica to carry her story alone. It wasn't just unfair, it was deeply disappointing. As one fan commented online, "You can't preach grace and hide guilt. Either you live your truth, or your silence becomes your confession." That comment summed up exactly what viewers have felt for years, because Welcome to Plathville isn't just a show about family anymore. It's a mirror reflecting what happens when image means more than integrity. The family that once spoke so proudly about doing what's right in God's eyes now stands accused by their own silence, not through hate, but through absence, not by what they said, but by what they refused to say. And that raises the hardest question of all. If forgiveness, honesty, and compassion are the values this family was built on, why do those rules only seem to apply to some? So tell me, how do you feel watching these double standards play out season after season? Do you think silence is protection or proof of guilt? I really want to know your thoughts. Drop your opinions in the comments below, because this conversation isn't just about the Plaths anymore. It's about every family that chooses image over truth. When everything fell apart, Veronica could have disappeared. She could have gone quiet, let the internet twist her story, or waited for someone else to defend her. But that's not who she is. Instead of hiding, she showed up, raw, vulnerable, and stronger than anyone expected. Her strength wasn't loud. It wasn't performative. It came through in her quiet posts, her calm voice, and the way she refused to let heartbreak define her. While others spun the narrative, Veronica grounded herself in something more powerful than damage: truth. For the first time, fans saw a woman from the Plathville world refuse to shrink. And when she opened up about her miscarriage, everything shifted. She didn't speak like a victim. She spoke like someone who had lived through loss and learned how fragile peace can be when people pretend pain doesn't exist. Her honesty hit viewers right in the heart. She wasn't trying to gain sympathy. She was reminding everyone that behind every reality TV smile, there's a real human being trying to survive. The way she talked about healing, about choosing peace even when she didn't get closure, turned her followers into believers. People started commenting things like, "You helped me forgive someone I never got an apology from," and "Thank you for showing strength without bitterness." That's the impact honesty has when the world expects silence. Meanwhile, the show carried on with its usual rhythm. Micah smiled for photo shoots, the family avoided questions, and producers leaned into safe storylines. But outside of TLC's edit, fans were rewriting the truth themselves, because Veronica had already changed the story. Her voice gave meaning to what the show refused to acknowledge. Through her openness, people began re-examining what Welcome to Plathville had become. Not a show about unity or faith, but a case study in selective compassion. Viewers who once saw Micah as the free-spirited dreamer now saw him differently, a man learning how actions have consequences, even when the camera cuts away. And the support for Veronica only grew. Every time she posted something uplifting, a quote about strength, a photo from her travels, or a note about self-worth, the comment section filled with gratitude. People weren't just following her life anymore. They were healing with her. That's what makes her story so powerful. She turned what could have been tabloid gossip into a real conversation about honesty, faith, and womanhood. She never lashed out. She never exposed private details. She simply told the truth that was hers to tell. No more, no less. And that quiet grace is what made the biggest impact. For many Welcome to Plathville fans, Veronica became the emotional anchor the show had been missing. While others hid behind family image, she lived in reality, and her courage reminded everyone that silence protects no one. It only deepens the wound. Sometimes it takes one person speaking honestly to change the tone of an entire conversation. Veronica did that. And because she refused to let shame or silence define her, she reminded fans, and maybe even the Plaths themselves, that redemption doesn't come from denial. It comes from facing the truth, even when it hurts. The world didn't see tears or public breakdowns from her. What they saw was composure. What they felt was empathy. She became a symbol of what it means to choose dignity when the easy path would have been revenge. That's rare in reality TV. And maybe that's why people still talk about her long after the storyline faded. Because the truth didn't just free her. It exposed what the show never wanted us to see, that perfection means nothing without accountability. And as someone who has followed Welcome to Plathville since the beginning, I can say this with certainty. Veronica's courage changed everything. Her story reminded us that the real power isn't in the spotlight or the image, but in the quiet act of telling the truth, when it would be easier to stay silent. When someone finally tells the truth after being silenced, the story changes forever. I think that's what makes Veronica unforgettable. Not the drama, not the betrayal, but the way she carried herself when no one else stood beside her. She didn't just survive the silence, she broke it. And for anyone watching who's ever been ignored, dismissed, or told their pain doesn't matter. Her story is proof that truth doesn't need validation. It stands on its own. I'm Sarah, and you've been watching Sister Wives Chapter and Reality Scandals Daily. If you felt something hearing this story, if you've ever rooted for the one who finally spoke up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Tell me in the comments, what do you think about Micah, Veronica, and the silence that followed? Do you think forgiveness without accountability is real healing, or just another mask? Make sure to subscribe for more real stories like this. Stories that remind us that behind every reality TV family, there's always another truth waiting to be heard. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is tell your story and never let anyone silence it again.